What's going on, guys? This is Bumpstar, and today we're playing all the mods 10 to the sky. In today's episode, we are finally getting into Powah. We will be exploring the Powah mod, and more specifically, the reactors from the Powah mod. After this episode, we are going to be able to start really just completely diving into every other mod in this pack, because, well, we're just not going to have to worry about Powah. So the great thing about this setup is that we will be able to expand on it and increase our Powah very, very easily. I don't want to talk about it for too long because I just kind of want to go right into it. So with the Powah mod, it has a ton of different options that you can choose from for power generation, but it also has some great storage added in here and power transfer, as well as player power, and just overall a really great, useful mod. So I like to just use this to kind of keep it straightforward and keep all of our power generated from one specific setup, so we don't have to run multiple different sources going around. There's nothing wrong with it, and Powah is not always the best option, but when you combine it all together and you use all the different options that it gives you, just makes it a lot easier. For power generation, we have things like the magmator, the fernator, the thermogenerator, the reactor, and there's solar panels, and they're all great options. The two best options I have found, though, is going to be the thermogenerators, especially in all the mod pack, and the reactors. Thermogenerators are great for when you're just getting started out and you have access to soul lava, as that gives you a ton of extra power. But before we can get into generating the power, we need to set up the basics for the Powah mod, and this is what throws a lot of people off and can be a little confusing to get into. So I'm going to walk you through step by step on what we need to do for that. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is set up the energizing orb, and we're just going to set that up down here with these power cables that we have down already. And we need to put down a pattern provider because we're going to set this up to be completely automated so we don't have to worry about it. So we're going to want to connect the pattern provider to our system, put the energizing orb on top. We set this to blocking mode so it doesn't push multiple things in at a time because that will ruin this. And then we have this set up where we use the configurator and we want to hit this until it is pointing up, just to make sure it's sending to the right direction, because sometimes this will bug out and not work. So you just use any type of wrench and you hit the top here and it will have an arrow that points up. Then we can guarantee that everything's going to be sent up in this pattern provider. The biggest issue that you run into with the energizing orb or automating this is that it will push the items in that you need, but it won't take them out. So what we're going to want to use is a modular router. So with that modular router, we can put that kind of anywhere. I'm going to put it here because we're also going to use a interface. We're going to put an interface right above it, and then we want to set this up with a sender and a puller module through a modular router. So the puller module is going to be used to pull the items from the energizing orb into the router, and then the sender module is going to be used to send the items in the router to the interface. And then this interface is connected to our cables, and that is going to send that directly back into our system. For the modules, just right click in the air and it'll bring up this screen. So you want to turn this to a whitelist, and then you want to put all the items in that you want it to pull. We are going ahead and we're putting the nitro crystals in, even though we're not going to be able to make these yet. And we're also going to put dry ice in here, as well as ender cores. Then exit out of it and always right click it again to make sure it's still set. And then you just take that and put it into the module here. And then with the sender module, we don't need to do anything because it's only going to move the stuff that's here. Before we put these in here, we need to shift right click what we want this to pull from. There we go. And then the same thing with the sender module, you want to send to the interface. And now if I take gold and some iron, and I put those in here, it's going to do nothing because I don't have the energizing rods down yet. So let's set those up. When you're setting these up, you want to make sure that there's a block space available around. And I will move this where we're going to put all of the power once we have wireless power set up, but I really just didn't feel like running a cable up through the roof over here. I'd rather just set this up for here for now and then move it later. I would suggest when you're doing this to make sure to set it up ahead of time where you want it to be so it makes it a little easier for you. So then you're going to put the energizing rods all around, and I have 9 of them set up just to make this nice and fast. These are just the basic tier because you need the actual materials of Powah to upgrade them to make them faster. They'll hold more energy, they'll push more energy, and it'll just make all of this quicker. But as you can see, as I set these up, they did take those items, so let's do it again. And now the modular router takes it and sends it out. If we go into Powah, we can see that we now have energizing steel in here. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up patterns for each of these. And put these patterns in here. And I would suggest later on, once you have more power going, you can actually set up patterns for the blocks. So if you look here, a block of energizing steel. If you do a block of gold and a block of iron, it'll give you 2 blocks of energizing steel, but it costs a lot more power, and it equals out to what it would be for 9 of them to begin with. But just to make it easier to start out, I suggest doing the individuals, and then once you have more power going, switching over to the blocks, because that's going to just make the process a lot quicker. But it just uses a lot more energy to do so. But now that we have that set up, we should be able to directly go to our spirited tier for a reactor, as well as player transmitters and things of that nature. But to start out, we are just going to use the hardened to get it going. So we need a player aerial pearl. We're going to need this. And with the aerial pearl, you have to use it on a zombie or a husk. And unfortunately, I don't really have anywhere dark enough to spawn zombies other than in here. So we may need to try and spam our way through some grounds. I'm just going to stand here and right click. And there we go. So that's all it took. And the reason we need that is for our player transmitter. Said we're just going to start with the, oh, gotta put that in our system. Just going to start with the hardened tier until we have our reactors going and fully set up for the extra power, because these do store a ton of power. This one can hold 10 million, but once you go up to the spirited, it holds 400 million. And well, if we put that down on our power line right now, that will completely devour all of our power. So just to set this up now, we put that here, as you can see, it is going to start sucking all the power from here and filling up this. And for now, this isn't going to work. You can tell based off of my jetpack. If you look on the left side here, it is still at 19.5 million FE and a little less than halfway full. To get this to work, we need a binding card. So we need to make a blank card, then a binding card. And in order to make a dimensional binding card, we need to use it on an Enderman or an Endermite. Luckily, we have been to the end already, so we can just go there and use it on an Enderman. And now that we're over here, let's go ahead and find an Enderman. And perfect. Let's get back home before the Ender Dragon tries to kill us. Now all we have to do, put this in here. We need to bind it to ourselves. So you want to right click it first so it turns green. And now we put it here and it says owner LOL Bumpstar. And as you can see on the left hand side, my jetpack's power is now filling up. If you're using just our thing tools, or you're using building gadgets or anything that requires power, that is going to be bound to your inventory. Now that we have wireless power set up for ourselves, now we need to set up wireless power for everything. And in order to do that, we need an ender cell. Now, with ender cells, they come in all the different tiers. With each tier, it has a higher tick rate. We're going to craft a spirited ender cell. As you can see, everything here is being crafted and moved along, and it is using a ton of power. Each spirited gem is using 1 million FE. Our magmatic generator is having a very hard time keeping up. So now if we place this ender cell down, one thing you're going to notice is that it doesn't have any capacity to it. And that is because you have to add the capacity yourself. So you could use energy cubes or energy cells. The energy cells work just like the mechanism energy cells, where they're just a block that holds power and then you can run cables off of it. You move power around and use it as a buffer, or we can use batteries. Either one works. The craft for them are pretty much the same. I just like to use the batteries. For now, we are just going to make a hardened battery because we don't have enough energy to fill up the spirited cell. It's the same reason we didn't do the spirited player transmitter yet. So now, as soon as we take this out, you can see it's starting to fill up because it's a energy item in our inventory. So it is filling up from our transmitter. Now, if we open this up and we shift right click, it now adds that to our ender cell. So now the ender cell has power, and it will continue to fill up as long as you have the facing set up correctly over here. And right now it is on send and receive. So we're going to set this to receive. So now it will not send power from any side, it will only receive power. And we'll go ahead and set this to the same, so we don't have to worry about power being pulled from these. They're only ever going to send power to it. As it stands, this thing is pretty much a energy cell, except it's not. You have these things called ender gates, and these are where you're going to get your wireless power from. So now we have ender gates, and ender gates are wireless power. They will allow us to give power to a machine without having to run a cable to it. They work, according to the machine, they work just like cables. So just to give you an example, I'm going to put a basic energy cube here. It has a little bit of power in it already because it was in our inventory for a second. But we're going to turn off all sides. And we're going to set the top to input. If we put an ender gate on the top, it is now instantly filled with power. If you right click the ender gate, you can see how much power is in here and what the transfer rate is. So this can transfer 200,000 FE a tick. It has a max capacity of 10 million. It is currently set on channel 1. And if we come over to our ender cell, it's also at 10 million. And this has the 400 transfer rate, but we're not moving power directly from this. We are wirelessly taking the power from our ender cell with our ender gate. If you look down here with the channel, this is also set on 1, just like the ender gate. So if we set this to channel 2, this no longer has any energy to it. This is still on channel 1 because channel 1 over there still has 10 million FE. You can use these ender cells to split channels. What you can do is set up 4 different ender cells, all getting power from our power source, but all on different channels, so you can control which channels are using power for different things. Sometimes I'll utilize that to set up power for different mods. So like channel 1 will be mechanism, channel 2 will be applied energistics, channel 3 will be something else, to just kind of modify where all of my power is going, so I know if something starts failing, I have a starting point to figure out why that power is failing. Once you put a ender gate down, it will no longer stack with the other ones because this now has a setup on it, so all you have to do is just put it in your crafting, pull it out, and it will now stack back up. So now that we have the wireless power set up, we could just stop here. If you're using power from a different mod and you want to just be able to get rid of all your cables, you could do this for the player power and the ender cell. It is an option, but if you're going to use Powah just for this, you might as well use Flux Networks, as it's a bit easier to use compared to this and a lot easier to set up. As I said at the beginning, the reason I use this setup is because I also use the power generation from Powah. It's using the same exact items that you'd use for power generation, so you might as well just make these items while you're doing it. So what we're going to be using through power is going to be our reactors. To start out, we're just going to do the blazing tier for the very first one. To kind of get our power going, you're going to need to make 36 of the reactors total. This craft will take some time because of how many different crystals it's going to need to craft. I would strongly recommend upgrading your energizing rods as soon as you can, because this will speed up this process a lot quicker. Then once you have your 36 reactors, figure out where you would like to place it, and when you look at where you're placing it, you can see it has this outline around it. The cool thing about this setup is it is going to build itself. So if we right click here, it is now going to take all 36 blocks from your inventory and automatically configure itself into the multi-block. And this is our blazing reactor. We just need to set it up so it gets all of the resources it needs without us having to do anything for it. If you right click on here, there's quite a few different things that it is going to require to run efficiently. The first thing is going to be a bucket of water. It only needs 1 bucket, and I don't think it actually uses this fluid. This just sits in it to cool it down. You're going to need your uranite, coal, redstone, and some type of cooling agent like ice. But the cool thing with Powah is there is dry ice, and we've already set up the pattern for that. So when you're placing your export bus, you need to place it on one of these faces. This here, there's one on each side, and there's one on the top. I like to put the export on the top, and then I'll put the power cables on the bottom. So with this export, we're going to need coal, redstone, uranite, water, and dry ice. Now, a lot of these we don't have already in our system. We have we have coal, we have redstone, we have ice, but we don't have these just sitting in our system at all times. So we are going to need a crafting card. Once we put that crafting card in here, now once we have this set up to our system, everything that's in here, as long as we have an autocraft set up for it, will be automatically crafted and then pushed into our reactor. So I've gone ahead and set up our wireless connector here, and I'm just putting one dead center in the top here because I plan on having this entire floor covered with reactors and just having this spider web out with all of our cables. We're going to use dense cables to run over to that direction, and then we'll branch off with our regular ones just to make sure we are utilizing as many channels as we can. As soon as we have this last piece connected, that should start autofilling in here. We want to set this to round robin, so it's going, instead of just sending all coal, then all redstone, then all of this, it's going to round robin each thing in to make sure this is as full as it can be. And as everything is being thrown in here, you can see the power is starting to fill up. There is a auto mode, and it will stop the reactor until it is below 70% and then start back up again, which we'll go ahead and turn that on for now just to conserve resources. You could put acceleration cards in here to speed up the process of sending all of these items in, but I don't find that it is super important to do so. So now that we have a blazing tier set up, that is now extra power. And what we can do is we can take an ender cell, put our ender cell down and set this to receive. And now all power that is generated from this reactor is going to be sent to our ender cell. Now that we have their power being generated, we're going to go ahead and make a spirited battery. And let's shift right click our spirited battery in here. Now, as you can see, this will start filling up with all of our power from here, and it is draining rather quickly, but it's all being stored here, so we're not wasting any power. From this point, it is going to be just scaling this up. Instead of using the blazing reactor, we're going to use the power that we are generating from this to create our spirited reactors. And well, we're going to make quite a few of them. So let's do that. So now I've upgraded our energizing rods to spirited, and I have disconnected them from this power source and have connected them to our ender gate, which is utilizing just the power from up there with our reactor. So that way we don't have to worry about our system shutting down, because I was kind of having a little bit of issues there. It was just starting to take too much power. So now that we have that set up, we should be able to make our spirited reactor. And that is much quicker. As you can see though, it is using a ton of power, and it's using more power than we can generate with just a single blazing reactor. But once we have the spirited reactor going, this will completely change the game. And now we have our spirited reactor. As you can see, this is filling up much quicker now. So what we can do is we can actually get rid of this setup here, and we can put those reactors back into our system and use those to craft the next set of reactors. As you can see, it is going to use a lot less resources because we already have 36 of these. Now that we have wireless power, we're going to go ahead and put a energy acceptor right here and put our ender gate right here. And now we can get rid of all of our power cables. And now everything has a hat that is powering each one of these machines without having to have a bunch of cables running everywhere. And that's going to be it for today's episode. We now have a ridiculous amount of power. Everything in our inventory is going to automatically be charged, so we don't have to worry about our jetpack ever running out of fuel, nor do we have to worry about any of our gadgets running out, which means we can start using some of the Just Dire Things tools, because, well, they're pretty strong and pretty fun. In between episodes, I will more than likely continue to add more of these reactors until I kind of fill up this whole space, so I just never have to worry about power again. One thing to keep in mind when you're setting this up is to make sure that you have enough resources to power all of these. So if you need more redstone, make another redstone geode. Same thing with coal. If you need more ice, do another ice seed. And well, you don't have to worry about water. But now that we have this all done, we can start playing around with a lot of other mods. And I think next episode, first mod that we're going to jump into may have to do with some automated nether stars. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions about how to run Powah with the Powah mod, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Later.